So I think there's a couple. One is borrowing and debt. I think people either think it's terrible. Having debt, the thing what people don't realize is, and it's always been demonized through history, right? Like, so Socrates said it was, immoral to charge interest. And a lot of religions don't allow payment of interest, but they don't realize that actually debt is fantastic. So if you're a poor person and you want to access opportunities you couldn't access otherwise, there's only one way to do that, which is through borrowing. You want to live in a house you don't have any right to live in. How do you do it?
Borrow.
You borrow.
Yeah.
You want to invest in education. You don't have the resources. How do you do it?
Borrow.
It's like a liberating thing. So people don't understand that piece of it. And then they don't understand the dangers. They don't understand the dangers, which is once you do that, it is a really, really serious commitment. And you can find yourself in a world, and I tell the story of what's called debt overhang, which is this finance idea, which you have so much debt that you can't actually do the best things for yourself because it's like looming over you. And that is the trap people fall into. The hard part for people is you got to think about the incremental wages. Like, how much more am I going to make? Not how much am I going to make, but how much more am I going to make because of this investment?
How much better of my lifestyle could it be, right?
Exactly, because of this investment. And people don't usually do that. And there's also, the truth about education, and I'm not just saying this because it's my business. I'm not just talking my own book, but the truth is, on average, it's a great investment. That doesn't mean it's always a good investment.
Yeah.
There's a lot of crappy investments out there. There's a lot of really bad investments out there. But on average, it's great. What you got to think about is there's a labor market out there. And you got to have skills that are going to be valued.
If you don't develop the skills that aren't valued, then you're not going to be able to make money.
You're not going to be able to make money. And then you have to ask yourself, if you want to do a degree and you want to do something that is not really valued in the labor market, whatever it might be, let's say you want to go to cooking school just to learn cooking. You should understand that's basically consumption. It's not an investment.
Right.
You're just having a good time.
It's pleasure.
And if you want to do that, you go do that. But don't kid yourself and think you're going to get it paid off.
Right.
That's just you having fun, like you go in the Super Bowl or some big thing you want to go to. So people I think that's what's confusing about a lot of these things. They're both investment and consumption. It's like a house, right? It's a big investment, but you live in it and you consume it all the time, right? And so there are these things that are weirdly both. There's stuff you invest in, and there's stuff you really, really enjoy.
Sure.
Not like stocks, which are an investment, and not like food, which is consumption.
Yeah.
Right? These things are actually in between, and that makes it really confusing, I think, for people.
Got it. Yep.
So I think the other big thing that people struggle with in finance and outside of finance is they think there's a lot of skill in finance. So the lesson of finance is it's almost impossible to tell the difference between luck and skill, other than over the long run. Right, so you got a buddy, I got a buddy, and the buddy says, you know what, I beat the stock market like 3 years in a row, 5 years in a row. I'm awesome. And the answer is, I have no idea if you're awesome. You may be awesome.
The market may have just been going up.
Exactly.
And you just got into the right time and whatever.
And in fact, there's this old coin tossing trick, right? Which is you get 80 people in a room. You toss a coin 10 times. And you kind of go through it. And then you say, who got 9 heads? Maybe 1 or 2 people. Who got 10 heads? You're pretty much guaranteed to get somebody in that room get 10 heads. And then you ask that person, how did you do it? And the person, of course, will usually answer honestly, which is, it was luck.
Yeah.
But when you're a mutual fund manager and you beat the market 10 years in a row.
I'm the man. I'm the woman.
I'm the man. I'm the woman. And I did it, right? And so I think people think there's a lot of skill. And the truth is, it's really almost very, very hard to beat the market persistently. There may be a few people out there who can do it well over the long run. I don't know who they are. You don't know who they are. Right. Don't believe the hype. So, for example, as you may know, there's this massive rise in indexation, right? So, like people basically just buying exchange-traded funds or index funds, and that's because people have figured out. Buffett is like a guy Buffett's super interesting, right? Because he actually, people think he's beaten the market for a long period of time, and he may have, but he also doesn't believe in a lot of these things, right? He doesn't believe you can just kind of be successful, no problem. And in fact, the way he works now, it's so interesting about Buffett. He basically monetizes his halo, right? So when he invests in a company, people rush in. And so what does he do? He kind of like, during the financial crisis, he bought preferred stock at Goldman and GE. He kind of rescued them. He got terms that you and I could not get,
of course,
right? Because he's Buffett. And then he does
influence.
He gets like terms I would never get in the market if I went to go buy that stock. And then he turns it into performance. So, it's really interesting. And I think that's one of the big problems in finance is we think that there are these super skillful people out there and they're super smart. Reality is some of them may be, but you don't know who they are. So in terms of savings, the first thing is save.
How much? as much?
The truth is, very few people oversave, right? So what does oversaving mean? Oversaving means I'm depriving myself today so that when I retire, I have more. Very few people make that mistake. Like 98% of people are making the mistake of not depriving themselves today so they can have more later. So for almost all people, it is save more than you're doing now. If you want to play and have fun, take a small chunk of your wealth and just go have fun. But don't do it with all your wealth, and don't pretend like you're doing something serious. You're just having fun.
Yeah, if you lose it, you lose it.
You lose it. It's just like buying tickets to the movies.
Yeah.
You're just going to like have fun with this money over here, and you're going to invest it because your buddy told you his company's great. That's fine, but don't pretend. It's like consumption again, right? You're having fun. You're not investing. You're just going and goofing off.
Yeah.
So I think the big rules are, save more than you think you need. Second, try to think about taxes. It sounds boring, but it's so first order. Third, don't pay a lot of people money for managing your money. And then fourth, create a little fun space and then go have fun.
Yeah.
If you have a lot of money, you can take 10% of it, and your buddy comes to you and says, I got a business I want you to invest in.
5-10 grand and put it in there. Whatever.
Yeah, then that's fine.
Right.
And in fact, actually I think the things I'm proudest about this book is I wrote a piece for the Crimson, which is the Harvard newspaper, called The Trouble with Optionality. So the reason I really like that piece is people in finance overlearn the idea of options, right? Because they think...
Give me the breakdown of options.
So the idea of options is, you want to have choices, right? And the more choices you have, the better. And options are contracts which basically say you don't own something, but you have the right to own something.
To buy it.
And people love it because that's what optionality is, right? So a lot of young people I see are obsessed with optionality, right? They're like, okay, I'm going to go to school because I need more optionality in my life, because then I'll have more opportunities available to me. I'm going to be in part of networks because I need more optionality. I'm going to go work at a prestigious firm because I need more optionality in my life. So and that sounds great, right? Because then you get to do more things in the future. So what I tried to point out in the book, and I do in this essay, is, you know what? Most of those people, they get obsessed with buying optionality, and that's all they ever do.
They never make a decision.
They never go and exercise the option. They never make the big investment, because buying options is addictive. You just buy more and more and more, and then you have to pull the trigger on something big, and you're like, no, more optionality, more optionality. That's all I want.
Yeah.
And so then they end up, and I've seen this with so many kids, because these are kids who are really smart. They got like the best safety nets in the world.
Right.
And then they keep buying more safety nets. And you're like, what the heck are you doing?
Just go do something.
Go do
Take
something.
A risk,
and the truth, what's weird is people don't understand, like the more safety nets you buy, the more you value safety nets. You're like, I got to buy another one because I'm so used to doing it. And then you end up like 40 years old and you're like,
I've got all these degrees, I've got all this stuff.
And I have all these safety nets, but I've never really done the risky thing that I wanted to do. And it's really sad. And so that's what I see with optionality. The other example that I kind of like is leverage. So this is
about that.
Yeah, so that's about debt, right? And people in finance love leverage. They're like, because their fortunes have been built on leverage. Think about a lot of people, especially in real estate, a lot of areas, it's been built on leverage. They borrow money, and then it allows them to own assets they have no right to own.
And they leverage that asset.
They leverage that asset, and then if things go well, their returns are outsized, right? Because that's what leverage does to your returns. And so I kind of talk about that. But then what I try to do in the book is say, that's totally analogous to commitments. What is debt? It's a commitment. It's like a really, really serious commitment. So I do this via The Merchant of Venice, Shakespeare's story, right? Nominally, it's about debt. This is the play where Shylock is this money lender. He's like, I want a pound of your flesh because you didn't pay me back. People think it's about debt. It's really about commitments. Like, it's about commitments between people. So the point of the story is that commitments are like debt. They allow you to do things you wouldn't be able to do otherwise. Commitments to people, to spouses, to families, to jobs, to organizations. You get to do things you can't do by yourself. So I give a couple of examples. So I talk about these two artists. One is George Orwell, who wrote 1984. And one is Jeff Koons, who's a modern artist. You may have heard of, he makes these massive sculptures.
Yeah.
So George Orwell is a low leverage guy. He is like living in London. Everybody wants a piece of him after World War II. He's like, I'm going away. He goes to the Scottish Islands, Hebrides Islands, and he spends 3 years alone, and he writes 1984 by himself. That's low leverage. He's not committing to anybody. He's doing it all by himself.
Right.
Jeff Koons, I think, is arguably the greatest modern artist. The Whitney Museum in New York had a retrospective of just him for the whole building. He creates these sculptures that are the size of this room, One's called Play-Doh. They're made of metal and glass and just incredible stuff. He has 150 people in his factory. He doesn't actually know how to use the material that he's working with. He relies on other people who use that material.
It's kind of like the visionary.
He's the visionary. And he actually, like, literally in one interview says, I'm the idea guy. He's gone bankrupt like 3 times. He's bankrupted dealers.
Wow.
He is living a high leverage life. Yeah. And he produces art that he wouldn't be able to produce otherwise. You can't do that by yourself.
No.
So the point is kind of like to say commitments and embedding yourself in a world of networks and commitments actually allows you to do stuff that you wouldn't be able to do otherwise.
Right.
So Archimedes says, give me a place to stand and a lever and I'll move the world. So Jefferson says the biggest lever in life is your reputation. So if you commit to the world,
like Buffett.
Yeah, exactly, like that. Exactly what Buffett does when he monetizes his halo. So Jefferson says basically, if you're good to the world, then the world, because you have a good reputation, will let you do things you have no right to do. Which is true, right? That's what reputations do, and that's why it's so hard when you lose your reputation, because reputation is the stuff that lets you say, "I trust you. Go ahead, you can do it." So you commit to good behavior, and then you get to do things you have no right to do. And that's the essence of commitments, and that's kind of the essence of leverage as well.
That's powerful.